What happens when men trained to defend a nation are denied the most basic dignity within its borders? This question underscores the tragedy of the Houston Riot of 1917, also known as the Camp Logan Mutiny, a searing chapter in American history that reveals the corrosive power of racism and the devastating consequences of injustice. The backdrop was Houston, Texas, a growing city in the throes of racial segregation. The city's Jim Crow laws ensured African Americans were relegated to second-class citizenship, subjecting them to constant humiliation and violence. In this volatile environment, the all-black 3rd Battalion of the 24th Infantry Regiment was stationed at Camp Logan, located in what is now Memorial Park, northwest of downtown Houston. These soldiers were part of the esteemed Buffalo Soldiers, veterans of campaigns in the American West, Cuba, and the Philippines. Yet, in Houston, they encountered an enemy unlike any they had faced before: the entrenched racism of the local police force and community. From the outset, the presence of black soldiers in Houston was fraught with tension. The soldiers, accustomed to a degree of respect and authority in military service, clashed with the local white population, who viewed them with suspicion and disdain. The Houston Police Department, notorious for its brutality, was a constant source of antagonism. The soldiers' uniforms, symbols of national service and pride, did little to shield them from racial slurs, harassment, or violence. The tipping point came on August 23, 1917. Earlier that day, Corporal Charles Baltimore, a respected soldier, witnessed 2 Houston police officers, Lee Sparks and Rufus Daniels, assaulting a black woman. When Baltimore intervened, he was met with violence. Sparks struck him with a pistol, and both officers arrested him, further inflaming tensions at Camp Logan. Rumors quickly spread that Baltimore and other soldiers had been killed by the police, a falsehood that sparked panic and outrage within the battalion. As night fell, chaos took hold. Believing an attack on their camp was imminent, 156 soldiers armed themselves and marched toward downtown Houston. Their objective was unclear. Some sought to rescue their comrades while others were driven by a desire to confront their oppressors. What followed was a tragic and violent confrontation. Shots echoed through the streets of Houston's Northside neighborhood as soldiers clashed with police and civilians. By the time the gunfire ceased, 15 people lay dead, including 4 police officers and several civilians. Among the casualties were members of the black community, caught in the crossfire of a battle they had not chosen. The aftermath of the riot was swift and unforgiving. Martial law was declared, and the 24th Infantry Regiment was relocated to New Mexico. Military authorities convened courts-martial in the largest trials in U.S. military history. In total, 118 soldiers were tried, 19 were sentenced to death and executed by hanging, while 63 received life sentences. These proceedings were marked by significant procedural irregularities, including limited legal representation and a lack of evidence linking many defendants to specific crimes. The trials became a stark illustration of the racial inequities that permeated both civilian and military justice systems. The Houston Riot shocked the nation, sparking debate over race relations, military discipline, and the role of African Americans in the armed forces. Critics condemned the soldiers' actions as reckless and criminal, while others viewed the events as a desperate act of resistance against systemic oppression. The NAACP and other civil rights organizations decried the harsh punishments, arguing that the soldiers' grievances, and the racism they endured, had been ignored. The systemic racism that fueled the riot did not arise in isolation. It was deeply rooted in the broader societal dynamics of early 20th century America. The U.S. Army, while providing black soldiers with opportunities for advancement and pride, also maintained strict segregation. These policies not only reinforced existing prejudices, but also created a tinderbox of frustration and inequality. When African American soldiers left the South for military bases in other regions, they often encountered new forms of discrimination, challenging their assumptions about the universality of liberty and justice. Houston itself was a city divided along economic and racial lines. Black residents lived in segregated neighborhoods and faced limited access to education, employment, and housing. They built resilient communities, opening businesses, schools, and churches, but these achievements were constantly undermined by systemic discrimination and violence. Police brutality was an all-too-common feature of daily life, further stoking tensions between black residents and the white establishment. The soldiers' actions on that fateful August night were not solely a response to the assault on Corporal Baltimore. For weeks they had endured a series of provocations and indignities, including harassment at local establishments and threats from armed white civilians. The decision to march into Houston was not premeditated. It was an eruption of pent-up anger, frustration, and a profound sense of betrayal. These were men who had sworn to defend their nation, yet they were treated as less than human by the very people they were tasked to protect. The courts-martial that followed the riot were unprecedented in scale and severity. The trials were held in quick succession, with little opportunity for the defendants to mount a robust defense. Despite the lack of clear evidence implicating many of the soldiers in specific acts of violence, the military tribunal handed down harsh sentences. The executions were carried out in secrecy, sparking outrage among civil rights groups and members of the African American press. Many saw the trials as a stark example of racial injustice, further highlighting the double standards applied to black soldiers. While the immediate aftermath of the riot was devastating, its long-term impact was complex and far-reaching. The Houston Riot became a rallying point for civil rights activists, who used the incident to highlight the systemic racism embedded in the military and broader society. The NAACP and other organizations called for reforms, advocating for better treatment of black soldiers and the abolition of discriminatory practices within the armed forces. These efforts, while slow to bear fruit, laid the groundwork for future progress, including the eventual desegregation of the military in 1948. The story of the Houston Riot also underscores the resilience and agency of African Americans in the face of overwhelming adversity. Despite the violence and repression they faced, black soldiers and civilians continued to fight for their rights and dignity. Their struggles were not in vain. They helped to pave the way for subsequent generations to challenge injustice and demand equality. Today, the site of Camp Logan is a place of quiet reflection, its history largely obscured by time and development. Memorial Park, with its serene trails and open spaces, offers little indication of the turmoil that once unfolded there. Yet, for those who know the story, it serves as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made by those who dared to stand against oppression. The Houston Riot of 1917 is not just a tale of tragedy, it is a testament to the enduring human spirit and the unyielding quest for justice. The Houston Riot of 1917 concludes with a haunting question: what might have been, had justice and equality prevailed? Instead of mutual respect, there was bloodshed. Instead of reconciliation, there was retribution. Today, the story of the Camp Logan mutiny serves as both a cautionary tale and a call to action, urging us to confront the legacies of racism and honor the sacrifices of those who dared to stand against it.